Welcome to America's Heroes Group.
And welcome back to America's Heroes Group with our partner and Veterans Legislative Voice. Today is Saturday, September 17th, 2022. September is National Suicide Prevention and Hispanic Heritage Month. Our host is Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host, Army National Guard veteran. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith. Our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Arnold Productions. And we have, once again, our familiar voice on the line, Miss Stephanie Kalota. She's a U.S. Army Reserve Sergeant First Class, a veteran and a founder and creator of the Veterans Legislative Voice. And we're going to talk about the legislation for 2022 with updates to what's going on with legislation around suicide. So, Stephanie, how are you doing today?
Doing okay. How about you too?
Pretty good, pretty good. So what can you update us on? Well,
there's not a whole lot of movement on that there, but there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be coming up. The House Veterans Affairs Committee actually plans on doing a suicide hearing next week or the week after. They've yet to add it to the calendar, but yeah, we really want to talk more about that talk more about suicide prevention month, but so that we can get more of these bills passed.
So what do we need to know about the process, the legislative process, and what is the thinking of Congress right now at this point?
Oh, goodness. Well, Congress has been really tied up with the PACT Act, with toxic exposures and things like that. There's other things that have been coming up as well, like reproductive care that's been coming up because of Roe v. Wade being overturned. So there's a lot of things coming at them right now, and I don't blame them because it's a lot of things to worry about. And what's really been, many advocates are trying to make sure that that Congress keeps in check on suicide. The biggest one is the USS George Washington with the suicides that they've had, 6 in the past 2 years, 3 in 1 week,
wow.
6 confirmed suicides. There's been a couple of suspicious ones or accidents that's been involved there. The Navy has a huge issue and vacancy of psychologists and psychiatrists. Just for that one George Washington, they're supposed to have 3, and there's 3,000 sailors there. They only have 1 and 1 technician to assist that doctor.
Wow.
So for 3,000 sailors, that's not enough to have one person that may have it, because, many people, I think 40% of all U.S. citizens here in the country are likely to have a mental health issue and need some sort of treatment and care. Not saying you guys are crazy, but some of us tend to have it, and it's very normal, and it's very valid.
And I think that's one of the things important to note that you brought up is that a lot of times people, because it's not just that there is stress in the military, but that people have had maybe issues before they join the military, which is part of the general population. So it's not like all of a sudden you can just ignore the problems of the general population, the civilian population, and expect that there are not going to be problems in the military.
Yes, that is so true. And then there's also people that will have PTSD or any other mental health disorders that are triggered by non-combat situations. I've known a veteran that actually was in basic training. He was walking down the street with his battle buddy going to a medical appointment, and there was a 5-ton truck with all of his buddies and platoon buddies in the truck, and it rolled over right in front of him. And so that trauma of him witnessing that actually caused him PTSD. And he had other issues that's happened, but things like that can cause it, and not many people realize that.
Do you think that there should be more screening? And I want to get into what are the ideas out there about legislation, like what are the things that they want to do? What can you legislate to try to help this problem? But do you think that I lost my question now. But do you think? So let's go to the second question. So what are the ideas that people are having about trying to fix this problem?
Well, screening is a big thing. Fort Riley Base Commander actually made it mandatory for all of the people on the base to go through at least one screening, with a mental health professional. And I believe within 8 or 9 months, they got almost 50% there. And I haven't seen the results of that, but that actually is a really great thing to happen. One of the things that's been also troubling, or at least causing obstacles for those that, need the treatments, is that commanders and other leadership, senior leaders, are trying to think of the best way to say it. They overreact when a service member needs treatment, or a veteran when regular civilian supervisors, if they need treatment, they'll overreact.
How do they overreact?
Sorry. The biggest one I've seen, which also becomes a deterrent of people actually going, is actually putting a hold or revoking the security clearances, which they could not do their job anymore, and not do, which is their livelihood. That's what they know, and that's their identity for many service members. And so that scare of having your security clearance taken, treated like a crazy person, just because with mental health treatments, it could be just like going to physical therapy.
Right.
It's not going to hinder everyday life. And for some reason, a lot of commanders do tend to over-exaggerate and think that these people with a security clearance will make the wrong decisions because they have this condition.
That makes sense to me now. So really, I think a lot of it's around the language and semantics of, what's going on. So if somebody's getting, like, for example, you said physical therapy, most of us, I think, as a general, a lot of people argue, a lot of professionals in the medical industry argue right now that mental health therapy is something that we all should be doing. Mental health exercises should be something that we should be doing to make sure, because our brain is in another part of our body, just like any other organ in the body. There's certain things you do to help your heart, certain things you do to help your muscles, certain things you do to help your bones, your eyes, your teeth. Your brain is another organ that needs to be taken care of. And oftentimes we don't think about that. So when someone is going to get counseling, I would feel more comfortable with a person with a weapon, a police officer, a first responder, a Marine, whoever, who's getting regular treatment and actual counseling on a regular basis. Someone talking to them saying, "Well, how do you feel about what happened today? You were in a traumatic situation today. How do you feel about that?" I'd feel more comfortable with that being in that platoon than someone just saying, "Well, just tough it out, and just be a man or be a woman up or man up, whatever, and just tough it out. Don't worry about it. We'll just get through this, whatever." That's when you start having people snapping off and doing stuff that they're not supposed to be doing.
Yes, and actually that was a big issue in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, because back then it was a huge stigma, and service members would self-medicate with drugs and alcohol and go AWOL, cause fights, do all the things that most people would do if they don't get treated for things like that. And yes, that's one of the things that needs to be really reviewed by Congress, is basically a set of standards of when to take away that security clearance, when to put a pause, when to not do that because they're doing regular treatment. It's those kind of things that really needs to be discussed out there. Another thing that they also need to talk about is a new term for some people. It's called moral injury. And moral injury happens to people that are survivors of military sexual trauma, of combat, of toxic leadership. Because to me, we need to talk more about PTSD from toxic leadership for military people, and it also happens in the civilian world as well, because that is so damaging on your mood, your morale, your decision-making processes, and how you actually treat yourself. One of the things that the Army did try to do that didn't do great, but they did do was with Penn State or UPenn, was the resiliency training, where they went a little crazy on it. I actually used to be a master resiliency trainer, and it was basically them teaching service members how to process a bad day, or why things feel like it's going on top of another, and actually trying to take a step back on stuff and just trying to analyze what's going on and how you can make a better decision in reaction to what's happening in front of you.
I think some of this research, I think we've seen a lot of this in law enforcement. Am I correct?
Yes.
In law enforcement, They do a lot of these things. They have reported in their studies that they've seen improvements in less I'm going to call it operational failures, but I guess another way to describe it, better success in their missions or their cases they're working on, whatever, when they're having to deal with very stressful and oftentimes very violent situations, when their lives are on the line and they have to deal with trying to take down or hunt for very dangerous people who are doing all kinds of crimes around the country. they found that by being able to decompress and get things off your chest, and also try to think about and rationalize, the stuff that you're going through, so it doesn't become something that actually affects you mentally. They are able to stay on task and stay focused and be able to do the things they need to do and to be the professionals they need to be to do their task at hand.
Yes, most definitely. And it's really difficult for people of Congress to understand that because they are so far removed. There are just under 200 people of Congress that actually were veterans. Some of them are still serving as reservists or National Guardsmen. Some of them are retired or regular veterans. And to me, that separation sometimes from that livelihood can also cause a misunderstanding of how important things are. And that's something that needs to be talked about and brought up with your Congress people, because you know what? Election's happening. Election's happening in 2 months, and I cannot wait, honestly. And for those type of things, because all the representatives will be running again, because they do it every 2 years. A portion of the senators will be running again, and a lot of them are doing town halls now and taking their recess time and the weekends to actually travel to places and meet people. So I would love to encourage anyone to speak to their Congress people, to ask them what they are going to do about veteran suicide, because right now, not much things have been moving for them, and it's kind of scary because whatever bills that they have put in already, by the end of this congressional session, they will die and no longer be able to move. So after the election, starting in January, the congressional session starts all over again, and they will have to reintroduce bills. They will have to try to get amendments or corrections made and try to get it voted upon. So we have until the end of this year to get some of these bills to be moved and to become law.
So is this bipartisan? Any bipartisan support on this?
It leans more to the left, I will say that, because a lot of times the Republicans tend to take the attitude that, they trust their commanders to make the best decisions for their service members. They tend not to get into what is required of the commanders. So that is a tendency of the Republicans. Not all of them are like that, I will say, but some of them are. And so it is more of a left issue. But it is something very important to talk about.
What would you say to those people that are on that side that say that, well, we're concerned, first of all, that that the commanders aren't the ones who are making these decisions, and they've been doing a great job for the last 50 years, 100 years, whatever, and also we're concerned about our military toughness. How will this impact those Marines that have to go make those hard choices, or not even really choices, to go out and follow those hard orders, I should say, that go out and have to go out and do these difficult things. Those Marines, those Navy SEALs, or those Delta Force guys, those Army infantrymen, Rangers, all these guys are out there doing what they got to do. Are we babying these guys? Are we at a disadvantage in any kind of way to our enemies?
Oh, no, definitely not, because mental health needs a regular checkup. It needs to be worked on and built up. A lot of times through therapy and group therapy, individual therapy, you actually learn different techniques, and you also become self-aware of how you're feeling. So for people like myself, I have an issue with crowds. I tend to walk faster to try to get out of the crowd, but then when you're in places like a theme park, it's never ending. So you actually start to learn different techniques, and you learn your triggers, and you learn where you're going to have a little bit of an issue with your mental health. I'm not going to say freak out or anything. You just, you're made uncomfortable. And to do those type of things, you learn different techniques. I find I put myself against a wall and just do deep breathing. I also use music to listen to, so then I feel better when I'm walking around in crowds. Other people learn different things, and those type of techniques are very important because you can make better decisions when your head is clearer. You can have more empathy for your subordinates. if they are going through some similar things. That was a big one for me when I was a leader, and I was even a security clearance manager myself, was given a VA disability for PTSD, rated for it, getting treatment, and was the security clearance manager, that you have these things and you could still have a security clearance and still be very productive in your job and in your regular day-to-day life. Those type of things is really important to understand. But the thing is that people need to be allowed to get those treatments and to be vulnerable, so then they can actually see how they can make themselves invulnerable.
And I think that's part of that false notion that, like, if you admit that there's some kind of fault or a problem with you, that you're somehow defective, and therefore you shouldn't be in this unit, you shouldn't be, at this elite level. And the reality is, we've seen it with professional athletes, we've seen it with law enforcement, we see it even in the military. I mean, having your mental health is so critical and actually helps you stay focused. It doesn't make you weaker. And then also there is this stigma of admitting that we're all not perfect. All of us have these different triggers and baggages and things that made sure that we just never thought about, never had to deal with. And then when you put into a very extreme situation, all of a sudden that thing explodes and you never even realize it was even in there. So, but being able to, if you can work through it and get that counseling beforehand, so you are mentally prepared, it puts you and all your fellow soldiers or airmen or wherever around you in a better position. It protects you and them.
Well, I love to use Simone Biles as an example. When she went to the Olympics, she did an exercise. Her head wasn't really in it, and she didn't have control of herself when she had to do those tasks. And so she took a step back because she knew if she did it again, she might be injuring herself. Those type of things, that awareness of a person is really important when you have to do big tasks that could injure yourself or, your subordinates or your peers or even senior leaders. If you realize that you don't think that you could be the best person for that, it is okay and actually smart to talk to somebody and you guys can change positions, change a task. Those type of things is really important because it's better to select the people that have the right headspace and the right, prep for it. And those type of things are completely valid.
And the good thing about it, when you in your story, is that Simone actually came back later in the Olympics and was able to win medals. But who knows what a catastrophe could have been if she just went out there, which has happened in the past. We've seen it happen. We've seen people do some crazy stuff, even act violently against other players or other people that are participating in the sport because they had a mental breakdown. And the only way they could react was either with violence or they just messed up and had a meltdown on the field or on the skating rink or in the gym, whatever. Yeah.
And she could paralyze herself.
Right.
She could have been paralyzed from the neck down if she made the wrong move. So having that headspace and having that self-awareness is so important because you can take the step back, actually work on a few things you need yourself, and then try it again when you feel that you're ready. It's very important to do those type of things. I've had one of the times that I had to run a range, and you know how important it is to be in the right headspace for that. And I realized I don't think I can do this day. And so it was a very, very big type of task and mission happening that day. So one of my buddies I spoke to and told him what's going on. He was behind me the whole time. He would help me if I made a mistake. He'd step in if there was some issue. And it was really good so that we had a successful mission and we were still able to do the task that day. And having that self-awareness really helps out for missions.
I think also, too, like you brought up screening again. I got a screening store. We had for some reason I was always cursed with this bad units. I don't know what it was, but when I was in basic training, and that's the two squads I was in then, we had two guys that had issues. One ended up in prison. One tried to kill himself, and so how he tried to kill himself, he was on the grenade range. And we're watching. This is the first time we're all throwing grenades and stuff like that. And we're watching through this bulletproof or this ballistic glass, whatever, in a bunker. And he's maybe 10 feet in front of us or whatever. and there's a brick wall. People that haven't been through this. There's a brick wall. You got to throw the grenade over the wall so many feet. I can't remember how it was. And then there's a field sergeant. There's guiding you through it. They're telling you what to do. And then when he tells you to go, you go. The kid just popped the grenade and dropped it in the bunker with him, and the guy that was with the sergeant. And we all freak out because we're like, we all then duck down because we thinking that's going to go off because he didn't. It wasn't like he pulled the pin, let the pin go, held it for like 2 seconds, and dropped it. And then the guy's like, throw it. Right, so he's like, throw it over the wall. Like we hear him yell, but we can't hear anything because it's like this ballistic glass in a bunker. So we hear it. It's like everything is in silence. And then the sergeant just grabs a grenade, literally just barely gets it over the wall, and within like a fraction, he jumps over the kid and covers him, and then boom, as soon as the grenade clears the wall, it goes off, and then you can hear that when the guy sticks it up, you can almost hear in the silence, the deafening silence, his heart beating like crazy. And we were all we were just blown away. Like we couldn't believe that happened. And then of course that kid had to be taken out of the unit. But I mean, that was something that, that kind of speaks to what you're saying about screening, because obviously this kid had issues before he was even, but in the recruiting process, they're, trying to get education benefits. You're trying to help you with getting a VA home loan, the VA guarantee loan from the VA. You're getting all this stuff that you're trying to, sign up for. You want to serve your country and you want to, have an adventure, get a skill and a training. But are you mentally prepared for what you have to do? And would he have done, if he had not broken down that day, would he have done something like that on a battlefield one day?
Yes, and it's scary. And he could have done it stateside as well, depending on his access. I was an ammunition specialist when I first signed up, so I would have had access to those type of things, and I cannot imagine someone else having that is in that mind state, in that situation. And back when, they were having 2 wars and having to send people to 2 wars, they weren't screening people to come in. They were just making sure you weren't already diagnosed with something. And, of course, there was no way for them to really check if they wanted to. So there was a lot of ways to get around that. And the proper screening beforehand is really important. A lot of us advocates also wish they could do proper screening for, toxic personality behaviors and things like that, because those people could end up causing a lot more damages to other service members. So those type of things should be really important to try to screen and screen out. One of the things that I wish that they would do at the leadership courses, because I actually used to teach a few, they would do. I really wish that they would do vignettes. If no one's familiar with that, it's actually having a situation. Your instructor will say, okay, this kid has an issue with this, that he's about to do this. What are you going to do? And you can go through the steps of how to intervent something bad happening, how to address that issue, and actually how to connect with that service member that needs that help.
Like role playing, basically.
Yeah. Yeah,
I think that would be helpful, and also too, all these things culminate in having, once again, a smarter fighting force in the military, but also reducing the after effects and the residue of PTSD, which most of us are going to have some form of it when you go through a process like the military, and particularly if you've been deployed. We might as well just stop playing around. That's just the reality of it. Most of us, you got to be a special person to not see somebody's head get blown off, or not have to pick brain fragments out of a tank to not have some kind of effect. That's to have that affect you in some kind of way. And you might be able to deal with it and move on, and go to the next level and do other different things and things like that. But that does change you psychologically versus someone who's just lived a charmed life and never had to deal with anything.
Yeah, and then the other thing about a lot of people, when they have exposure to that, they don't get it addressed, and it'll come up later down the road. I've been in therapy for years, mostly for a lot of things, but it's very helpful. And then a few months ago, I actually got triggered in something that I never addressed in almost 12 years. Had that buried, didn't want to talk about it, ashamed of it, just had that little nugget right there. And then when I get triggered, I was just done for the whole week. It was very difficult to have to do my normal tasks. And having to get into that situation is pretty scary for a lot of people. It's stressful for yourself. It's stressful for the people that's around you. And it's the best thing to do is to get treated and talk about it and not be ashamed of those type of things.
So what's your gut feeling? Is this something that we're going to see movement on in the near future? When I say near future, maybe in the next couple of years?
I would say in the next couple of years. It's always slow with Congress, as you guys are aware of, because up to 4% of congressional bills actually get approved. But the thing is that there's a lot of duplicate bills, so just be aware of that. It could be a little bit higher, but it's not that high. But so it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of congressional hearings. It takes a lot of studies, and then it takes a lot of attention, which we need to ask everyone to act as constituents and talk to their congresspeople and say how important this is. I know a lot of people that have died and died by suicide, and just trying to keep their memories alive because of those situations and trying to make sure that it doesn't happen to another person is just so important.
Stumpy Kalota, always a pleasure to have you on the show. You always give us great information and things to think about. And once again, we got to get our veterans, our 20 million strong veterans out there to go out and vote and think about these issues that can make the lives for future veterans easier and better and more healthy. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. And check out congress.gov. You can see all the bills there, look it up, and you would learn who voted for what and who introduced what. So that way you know who to vote for.
See you next time, Stephanie. This is America Heroes Group. We'll be right back.